Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. And now, here is your host, the lovely, delightful, insightful, and all-around great gal, Ms. Barbara DeLong.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nightlight. I have to chuckle every time I listen to that intro because Ken Quiet Hawk put a little of his own twist in there, for which I am eternally grateful because he is an amazing man. Tonight is a special night. We have Tammi Baliszewski. I hope I said that right. She holds a PhD. She's a PhD, and she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and has completed 3 master's degree programs in spiritual psychology with an emphasis on health, consciousness, and healing, and a master's in metaphysical science. Dr. Tammi has 2 doctorates in holistic life counseling and metaphysical counseling, and is also certified in hypnotherapy. She's a certified Mandela facilitator and art for healing instructor. She hosts the very popular radio program Journey to Center on Empowered Radio, and you can find her on www.tammibphd.com. And in her spare time, she has written 2 amazing books, Manifesting Love from the Inside Out and Manifesting Prosperity from the Inside Out, and we're going to be talking about those tonight. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Tammi. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm so happy to be spending some time with you this evening and with whoever's connecting with us. I'm very honored.
Well, I have found that you never know who's out there, which is the coolest thing ever. and when I started doing radio, I listened, of course, to a lot of other people who did shows that were in this similar genre. And one evening I was listening to somebody and they said, well, nobody's calling in with questions, so I'm going to play some music. And if nobody calls in, we'll just shut the show down. And I waited and she played and there was nobody else and she shut the show down. I made a mental note to myself. That is something I want to take note of. If I'm committed for that time frame, I'm going to be on the air. And probably 4 or 5 months later, something happened to my switchboard and no calls were getting through. And I couldn't see the chat room. That was not there. And I didn't know if there was anybody there or not. And so for 2 hours, I read the universe. I just said, okay, and I didn't, know if anybody, is anybody there? and so a couple of days later, when I checked to see if anybody had, actually been there were like 300 people that were listening that night.
Wow, we're not alone.
And so it's like, just because you can't see them, just because you can't touch them, smell them, or hear them, doesn't mean they're not there. And so, I always, whether or not, the chat room has people or whether or not people call in, I plow ahead. And I'm always surprised later to see wow, they may not have turned up in numbers that evening, but they were definitely there. And I think that's something we all should. I think it taught me a lesson in that even when you don't think anybody's listening, there really is somebody listening.
That's beautiful. I say that about our angels. Just because
Oh,
you
gosh,
don't
yeah.
see them or hear them or really sense them in a tangible way doesn't mean there's not billions of them around you supporting you and loving on you and pouring down grace on you. We just have to open our hearts. We just have to crack open our hearts to believe it and then receive it. So I think that's a
Yes.
beautiful message.
It really, I have found in my later years that so much happens in a subtle way. And if you are paying attention to all of the nuances of things that are going on around you, you learn so much more about yourself and about the people in your life. And it truly is amazing.
I
But
love that.
I have to say, you came to this field much in the same way a lot of us did, through trauma.
Mm-hmm.
and
That's true.
and I had, major car accidents. My life changed totally. I felt like my legs had been cut out from under me. They hadn't been, but that's how I felt. I lost my career. I lost everything. I mean, I not quite. I had a mother that was there for me, but the life that I thought I was going to lead, the life that I thought was carved in stone, was just suddenly washed away so fast. And it was like, well, what else do I have and where do I go? And
Mm-hmm.
it was into this field of healing and consciousness and understanding myself and doing a lot of digging and looking in the mirror, really looking in the mirror, not to see if my hair was right, but to see if my aura was on straight. and and you went through, a similar situation where your life was turned upside down, and you found, in order for you to reclaim yourself, you had to find a way to do it, and you turned to this field, and you turned. My God, this is the most. I mean, PhDs and master's degrees and all sorts of amazing certificates in healing and counseling and everything else. So I'm wondering, talk to a number of people who have come to this field through difficulties of their own, and they seem to me to be, not that other people aren't valid and whatever, but when you have to go through the healing process yourself, you're a much better teacher of it for other people.
Yeah, definitely. Going through the trenches, you become very familiar with the terrain. And I was absolutely brought to my knees. And like you, Barbara, I thought I knew what I was supposed to be doing and who I was supposed to be with. I thought I knew what was going on. And then when things fell apart, I always say my ego was devastated, but my soul celebrated, because then that did put me on the path of healing, become the wounded healer, to really look inside, like you, not just look at the surface anymore, but to really go much deeper. And it felt like the universe was dropping breadcrumbs, and it was just little bits at a time. I couldn't see very far, but I could look down and see the next step. And it was tough. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't that much fun going from red carpets to massage school. Again, my ego didn't love this work. But it was sort of like my house of cards fell down. My castle that was built on sand came crumbling down, and it was time to create a foundation, a very solid, stable foundation to rebuild my life on. And I feel like that's what I've done.
Well, I would say so, and my goodness. First of all, I've read both books, and I think they're incredibly well done. And I highly recommend them to everybody out there. They're Manifesting Love from the Inside Out and Manifesting Prosperity from the Inside Out. I read them I read them first, the love and then the prosperity, because I thought, that was maybe the way one should work on one's consciousness. But that's just me. You can read them in any order you want. What I found was that not only do you say, well, in order to attract this into your life, you have to become this, which is true. I mean, totally true. And, you know, when you say this to someone, they look at you and say, how? And most people, most counselors, you know, kind of just say, well, work on yourself. But you give people directions and exercises and all sorts of suggestions on how to do the work, which I think is fabulous. And I admit that in many cases, you know, I think, she must have been listening to my show.
If you were doing it in 2000, I might have been picking up on it. Tuning into
no.
you.
Don't think so. But what I find is the message, you know, that I have been preaching for a long time, very similar to yours, and the techniques very similar to yours, and I think that the information is, and because a lot of us have grabbed onto the same information and are presenting it differently in subtle ways, it just means that there, you know, it's different strokes for different folks. Whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
And you know, we both you do work with journals a lot, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah, writing is a way of really tapping into some inner wisdom. I think writing down our goals or intentions or epiphanies or revelations can really shift us in our vibration very quickly in a really solid way. And another thing that I really believe is writing things down is a way of giving roots to things that we hope for or desire. Writing things down is our greatest predictor for success. So when people want to manifest something, I'll say, you know what, why don't you write that down? And it gives those ethereal notions roots in physical world reality. And I think that's such a great place to start. And then as you write, you can start getting into the feeling state. And then when you start getting your conscious mind and your emotions on board, and especially if we can start engaging this subconscious mind, that is really a recipe for success.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I write it down to people. You know, keep a gratitude journal, keep a journal of some sort. Even if you put recipes in it, it's okay. Just so long as you're writing something down. In my mind, and this is just my perception of it, that if you have a thought, if you have a recognition and you thank the universe and, you know, I got it, thank you very much, I see the connection, and you don't cement it somehow within this physical reality, they don't have any way of knowing that you really did get it and that you're focused on reinforcing it over and over and over again. You know, when teachers a long time ago, well before my time, of course, wanted you to not talk in class and you got caught talking in class, they had you write on the blackboard 100 times, I will not speak in class, or I will not hit, you know, Lizzie in class, or, you know, you were writing things, and oftentimes this punishment it's something over and over again, and in many ways that is programming the mind on a subtle level to not do it again. Of course they do,
true.
but
that's
you know,
affirmation. Writing down affirmations. I think that's actually accurate. Hadn't considered that, but I think you're right.
So you know, it's sort of like that. That's the simplest of affirmations. If you want to change and, you know, expand and whatever, and you don't want to go the journal thing, you know, assign yourself 100 times a day for a week and a half or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, and you'll find that what has a shift in you that didn't feel natural becomes natural. I spoke once with a spiritualist minister that I worked with. Well, I studied with him for 7 years, and you know, I said, what do you do about people that you genuinely don't like? You know, I said, you're all for love and brotherhood and all this crap, but you know, there are people out there that I don't like. And he said, you know, I could give you a whole spiritual lecture or sermon on this. And I said, you know, but keep it simple would be cool. And he said, it's real easy. You fake it till you make it. And
I've said that. I agree.
And it's true. If you genuinely don't feel, and I'm not saying you have to go up and have lunch with these people, once a week forever or anything like that, but kindness, just simple kindness when you don't really feel it, put out there on a regular basis does become sort of a habit. You do reprogram yourself for it, and
I think that's so true.
And that opens doors. That takes you to another level inside. The element here of manifesting love. That's something that everybody is trying to do, and not a lot of people are having luck. I mean, there are people that do find their true love first time round, and it's magical and it's wonderful. And I'm really glad for them. They must have really worked hard in a past life.
Right.
But for the majority of us, lots of times, relationships are to teach us something about ourselves. They aren't meant to be a forever. And
I think that's so true. It's one of our biggest areas and opportunities for healing, growth, for cleaning up our karma. I say we incarnate for 4 reasons: to clean up our karma, to learn the lessons of love, which really needs to start and end with ourselves, to share our gifts, and to have a good time. But it's hard to have a good time if we haven't done some of the work with those first 3 steps. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know until, again, things come crashing down and you set different intentions. Because my intention was to find great love. And I was working from the outside in, and it seemed to be working okay, so I hadn't considered any other approach. And I think that's just human. That's kind of how we're wired to navigate this planet.
You were fortunate in that you happened to be extraordinarily beautiful. Easy for you
tell people
to go from the outside in.
But you know what? It's so interesting, Barbara, because people have said that to me before. And I said, you know what I have learned? Beauty does not attract love. Beauty may attract attention, and it may attract predators, but it doesn't necessarily make it any easier to attract authentic love. Because what we attract isn't what we think we want. We attract who we are. And I've seen something with a lot of the clients I work with, and I call it pretty girl syndrome, where they don't feel that great about themselves, but they know they can do their hair and their makeup, and they can put on a push-up bra or a cute outfit, a mini skirt, and get a lot of attention. But it's sort of like if you take an empty box and you wrap it up with pretty ribbons and bows, but you don't feel like what's inside of this box is a gift. It's very, it can end up being really surface. I had this pattern of feeling really objectified in relationships. And when I stumbled upon this path and started doing this work that we both do, I had to ask myself the question, well, if you feel objectified, how do you objectify yourself? And I had to admit that I was objectifying myself. So we attract what we put out, we get. I was I was just playing kind of surface. I was like a Barbie doll. It's like, well, if I weigh the right amount and if my hair's this and I look like that, then I will attract love. No, not unless you know your love, not unless you're residing in the place of love. And that's not where I was at. And so it was definitely a process.
Well, and I tell people all the time that, you attract people according to what you think about yourself. And I, I will admit that there was a time in my life where I would say, my God, I must have a sign on my forehead. I just attract losers. And I did. And I mean, it was like, holy mackerel. I didn't know there were that many out. And it wasn't until I started to realize that I was advertising for it. I was putting it out there. I was saying that this is what I attract, and that's what I attracted. And so it was a matter of having to go inside, and at some point in time, later in life, actually, I can remember standing in my garden, looking around and saying, you know what? And I had been alone for like 13 years. And I said, you know what, universe, if this is what it is for the rest of my life, I am content. I am blissful. I'm just fine with it. But if you want to send me somebody, they had better be spectacular, highly intelligent. And, I gave a whole list, and I said, if you can't deliver that, don't bother, hit me next lifetime. I'm fine. I'm really very happy. And within a couple of months, and I was very specific. I said, I'm not going to go looking. They'll have to find me on my radio show while I'm, in my computer room. That's it. That's how it's got to happen. And I let it go. And of course, in those 13 years, I was doing a lot of work on myself. And several months later, I was doing a radio show on UFOs, and I had an author on, and somebody in the chat room kept saying, I'm an expert in the field, I'm a this and a that, and I kept writing back, good for you, but I have a guest, and the guest had to leave, and so I pulled this other guy on, who was actually an expert in the field. And he was in California, and after the show, he wrote me a letter and said, I'd really like to talk to you more. Here are my credentials, here's my bio, here's my this, here's my that. I decided he was in California. Even if he was an axe murderer, he couldn't get to me. And so we started talking. And within 7 months, he had moved in here. And our very first date was me flying to San Francisco and him picking me up in his van with his 3 cats and driving 3,000 miles across the country. It's sort of like the universe heard me and said, she's much too happy and content. Let's just stir her world up a little bit. And we often spoke that we were definitely cosmically manipulated for this whole thing. And we ended up getting married, and he did die a year and a half later. But my goodness, it was an amazing 3 years. And I absolutely, am grateful for having had the experience. But it came at a time when I valued myself enough to say, here's my shopping list. Don't deviate, because I'll just say no thanks.
Well, and you bring up such a great point, Barbara. It's like it really is. People have come to me, when will my beloved show up? When will my beloved show up? I said, when you don't care anymore, when you're dancing in your light and you're so happy with your own life that you don't have that attachment any longer. And I found that whether we want to manifest a great job or a great relationship or whatever it is, to hold it lightly in our hands, to have a preference rather than an attachment. When we're soft with, but just like you did that, you get specific about what you want, but then you kind of surrender it. You hold it lightly in your hands, and then it can show up. Because I feel like when we're attached and we're grabbing and it has to look a certain way, we're in kind of a fear-based posture. And like the end of a magnet, that's going to push what you want away from you. But if you're in that soft preference and clear about what you want, and you're just relaxed and you're dancing in your own light, it's such an attractive and magnetic energy field that it can be drawn to you with a lot of grace and a lot of ease. And especially if you specify that that's how you want it to come into your life. So, yeah, good job. Exactly.
Well, but the other thing, too, that is so important, when people get together, you have to hold on to your own dreams and continue to follow them. So often,
so true.
I mean, it is. I have seen this happen over and over and over again. When people get together, one of the couple always says, well, I have to help them realize their dreams, so I'll put mine on hold. And the minute you do that, you start to dim the light that attracted them to you. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, you are not that
they were
element.
Attracted to.
Yeah. And it's gone, and you don't understand what happened. I sacrificed everything for you, and here I am. And so it's kind of like you have to make sure that your dreams are continued. And, I hate to say it, but your dream can't be to be somebody's wife and mother and yada, yada. It has to be what in your life is important for you.
Yeah,
what are
you're
your
no longer
goals?
the center of your own experience. You're not on that solid ground within yourself. And I did the same thing, Barbara. I gave myself up. I was with this man who was very well established in the industry, very well known. And I felt, after I got together with him, I felt a little silly going on my little auditions. And I gave up my dreams and just kind of ended up drafting behind him. And just like you'd mentioned, my wattage started to dial down. And I started to get sick. I mean, my life force was diminishing, and then he didn't find me all that attractive after a while. And I can't really say that I blame him for kind of replacing me with somebody that had more vibrancy and more life force and more joy. And I had to find myself again. I lost my way. And so you bring up a good point. Don't lose yourself in relationships. I think it's so important to have clear boundaries, to know who you
Oh, yes.
are, to like who you are, to stay in touch with what brings you joy, your creativity, and don't sacrifice or surrender yourself because it never works. No one can rescue you, and you can't rescue anyone. It's a recipe for disaster.
Oh, absolutely. But in our 20s, weren't we taught? I mean, I'm older than you, but I was taught. Yes, you have a career, and you until you get married, then of course you're a wife and a mother, and that's your life, and that's what I was taught. And it took me one marriage to discover that was not the way it was supposed to be. and it was sort of like I got a son out of that marriage, and he is the apple of my eye. He's 50 years old now, so he's not a child any longer. But then a second marriage that was the same thing. He kept saying, stop teaching, you're shoving us into the wrong tax bracket. And it was, no, this is my career. I hold on to this. And that helped to destroy that marriage because I wouldn't give up doing what I felt was my career. Turned out it wasn't my career, actually, but my career was more in the metaphysical, holistic world. And that marriage, when that marriage ended, I felt like crap. And it was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. I was a good wife, I was a good mother, and I was a good teacher, but I felt empty and I wasn't fulfilled. And that was the point that I started to really look at this field. And I'm not saying everybody should be in this field full time at all, but I am saying that it should be a part of your life in getting to know yourself and really coming into contact with that higher consciousness that we all carry within.
That's been the recipe for success myself, is making that relationship, God as we know it, my priority. God as you know it, God as I know him, to be my priority. Father, Mother, God, universe, however you want to refer to it, and making that a priority. And it was important to me when I was younger, but often when I would end up in a relationship, that would go into the back seat or maybe on the outside of the car. So, to make that a number one priority. And the other thing that I think has been so vital for me, it's such an important piece of the puzzle, is establishing a relationship with my inner child. If I take care of my relationship with my inner child and my relationship with that something greater, my life works. As soon as I forget to take care of one of those two relationships, it's not long before I'm off track and sideways and feeling a little disoriented and not very good. So it's simple work, but it's just a matter of remembering to do it and being very disciplined with it and really, really taking good care of ourselves in that regard.
Well, now you've made a really good point, and you bring it out in your book. I have a really good friend who, I mentioned her inner child, and she says if my inner child gets in the way, I tell her to shut up and go sit in the corner. And I thought,
that makes me sad. That makes me sad for her.
Not smart. And so now that I've got you on the phone, so how do people actually make a connection to that inner child? And it is important.
It's so important. And, a lot of times when we or anybody we see go out of proportion with their emotions about anything, there's a thread going back to an earlier time in our life. Most of us, I think, are walking around with a lot of very hurt aspects, a lot of parts of ourselves. Anytime we experience a betrayal or a drama or a trauma when we're young or even when we're older, I mean, our inner child could be, when we got a divorce, when we were 40 or 50 years old. It doesn't have to be just what happened to us when we were 1 or 2 or 6. Something I like to do, I do have guided meditations about this, and it can be a very simple process. You can simply turn inward and say, I'd like to extend an invitation to the inner child in me, whatever age, whatever aspect that would most benefit from my current attention and affection right now. And I've been doing this work for a long time, and I've never had anybody say there's no one there. It might take a little bit for them to come into focus. Maybe they're hiding behind a tree because they don't trust us, or maybe they just show up as kind of a light initially. But if we sit with it and we just extend that invitation from our heart to the young one inside of us that would most benefit from our current love and attention right now, you can trust who shows up. And sometimes, and it can be different. There's no one way or right way with this work. I've had people say, it looks like a little girl and she's burnt. It's like she's got bandages on her and she's very sick and she's very thin. And I'm like, well, let's just spend time with her, and what can we do to nurture her or heal her? And often it's just be with me. Just be with me and talk to me or listen to me. Other times people will connect with what I refer to as the divine inner child. The inner child that's happy, healed, and whole despite everything that's happened to us. And that's always a gift. And we all have a divine inner child within us, whether they show up right away or it takes some work to find them. And that's the part of us that I feel is directly connected with our soul and source, knows our purpose, knows what brings us joy. That is such a blessing when we can connect or reconnect to that part of us where it's almost like, to me, if we do this work long enough, our higher self and our inner child can kind of seem to merge. It's a part of us that is sitting next to spirit that knows why we're here, knows how to celebrate, knows what brings us joy. And once we tap into that and start living with that aspect guiding us and leading us and holding our hands, life becomes an incredible celebration. This is how we bring heaven to earth. And I'm sure you've heard the quote from the Bible, Barbara. If you want to get into the kingdom of heaven, be like little children. And to me, that's what this is about. It's getting in touch with that divine inner child. Life is so joyful. Life is so blissful when we're back into that place of love.
Oh, yeah. And so often things that have happened as a child so influence, even without our recognizing it initially, they influence our adult life to an extreme.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And
it's our foundation that we're building our adult life on is what happened to us as kids.
Oh, yeah. And, going back and understanding that and sort of patching it up as best you can. And the other part, too, is that inner child, that celebration, that joie de vivre that children have is something that we should all be experiencing as an adult. I mean, I'm really fortunate. My inner child never went inner, and so that I'm very easily amused, and it really, when I think of my childhood, and my parents got divorced when I was quite young, and my father was, I would say, emotionally unavailable. And if I look at the people in my life that for the longest time I attracted to me, especially the men, they were all, absolutely every single one of them, emotionally unavailable to me. I was repeating a pattern over and over and over and over again. And it wasn't, when you recognize that, I know a lot of people will say, I don't understand it. I keep getting the same kind of person, constantly. And it's like, well, tell me a little bit about your past. Tell me about your family. Tell me about what it was like, when you were very, very little. And once you recognize a pattern, you have the power to change it. I tell people all the time, and I truly believe it. We create our reality by our perspective of it. And if our perspective is, I'm going to attract the same kind of person, the same kind of pattern, then you do that. If you don't love yourself, then you will attract people that aren't going to love you. I mean, if you want a certain kind of person in your life, I tell everybody, become the person you want to attract. Don't take this to extreme. And
agree more.
It's just kind of like, be solid, be sturdy, and I will admit that I have had some major lessons handed to me by people that I thought I was in relationships with, and I do treasure the lessons they taught me. I have not written thank you notes, but I do treasure I'm next lifetime I'll maybe be evolved enough to do that. But it's just, if people are teaching you lessons and you recognize the lesson, then you can do something about attracting something else into your life. And Tammi gives you all sorts of amazing, amazing ways and examples and questions you can ask yourself, and on and on and on. Your book is really fascinating. And anybody, I mean, I read through it. I have to admit, I didn't work through all of the different exercises, but they're valuable step by steps. And if you'd rather pay for a shrink for a long time, go ahead. But frankly, I'd rather read the book and apply the techniques that you've got here, because they do help people to understand themselves much more deeply and much better than, frankly, regular counseling. One of the things you're certified in, which fascinates me, because I paint mandalas or did. What is a mandala facilitator?
Mandala facilitator. I support people in midwiving their mandalas. I support them in creating heart work. And I stumbled upon the mandala when I was getting my degree in spiritual psychology years ago, and they had us watch a video about what a mandala is, and we sat on the floor and we drew mandalas, and it was the happiest I ever remembered being. I'd been on a lot of different types of antidepressants and such, trying to alleviate my angst, and nothing worked. When I was coloring my first mandala, I was like, I feel like my soul is humming. This is like what I've been searching for, the peace and the relief. And after every day when we would have to stop, I would get so frustrated because I just wanted to keep going. So after class was over, I ended up buying a lot of art supplies and would spend hours creating these mandalas. And I thought, this is a colossal waste of time, but at least I'm not doing anything destructive. And so I'm not shopping. I'm not spending a lot of money. I'm not doing something that's not good for me. And it was kind of funny because a friend of mine had seen my drawings and went, oh, my God, those are amazing. We have to do an art show. You have to start painting these. We have to do an art show. And I was scared to death. But because she said so, I did it. And one of the mandalas, the most, I think, powerful thing about the mandala is the intention. Creating that intention or claiming that intention prior to getting started. And getting started can be simply like, okay, my intention is to manifest prosperity. And then close your eyes and say, you can say to your heart or your higher self or even your subconscious mind, whatever resonates for you, please reveal to me the perfect healing symbol for prosperity. And what I saw clearly in my mind's eye was the same image that's on my Manifesting Prosperity from the Inside Out book. And so I drew it, and my girlfriend's like, that's amazing. I love that. So I ended up painting that, and I sold it at this art show that we did for $2,500. And I was astonished. And the mandala continues to astonish me. It's like I ended up working with a man, Paul Husenstam, who's, I would think, the preeminent authority alive right now in regards to painting mandalas. He's an amazing, amazing friend and teacher of mine. And he taught me how to teach. I was painting them myself, and it would sometimes take me 4 to 6 weeks to do one painting. But I started studying with him and then learned how to teach others. So what used to take me months, I can help people create in a day or 2 days. And it's an incredible process, and it's so revealing. Everything we need to learn, we can learn through creating mandalas. The spiritual path disguised as art, and it can also be called a painted prayer. Carl Jung loved the mandala, and when he transitioned when he was in his 80s, he stumbled upon them when he was in his 30s. He had said the year before he died, the mandala was the most powerful healing tool that he had encountered in his lifetime. He called it the archetype of wholeness, and simply by virtue of creating them, we heal. And we don't even have to know why or how. You create them, you're going to heal. You're going to call all parts of yourself home. And I think when we become whole, when we become congruent in body, mind, and spirit, when the inner child's on our lap and we're connected to something greater, this really is how we manifest with grace and ease. And that's how we attract synchronicity and divine support. So the mandala is definitely a really huge and important and fun piece of the puzzle for me as far as healing and expanding my consciousness.
Oh yeah, I know when I suggest people to some people, maybe some meditation would be a good idea, and it's not, I can't do meditation. I said, well, I tell you what, just Google mandalas for coloring, print them out, and spend half an hour to an hour a day coloring. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I've been telling people this for 30 years. And recently they've come out with these studies that coloring is a form of meditation. It takes you into the alpha theta state. And it's like, well, where was this study when I was really needing it to tell people? Because
you were telling them. You were telling them. Maybe they did it and decided to do studies.
Yeah, it was just, I told you I was in a spiritual development class, in the 70s, early 80s. And one of the homework assignments was to do a mandala for somebody in the group. And I did. And I've always liked, I'm not an artist, but I've always enjoyed, playing at being an artist. And it came out so well, others asked for one, and before I knew it, I was in the business of painting personal mandalas, and there are over 500 of them all over the world.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I don't do them anymore. I did they evolved into the deck of cards, and once the deck of cards was published and out there, I haven't stopped, but I kind of just thought, okay, this was the whole process was to get that deck of cards out there, and once the deck of cards is out there, then I can go on to other things. And
right.
while and so it was, somebody said, "Aren't you sad you're not doing them anymore?" And I said, "No, I did a lot of them." And but the mandalas have always for me been a symbol of wholeness and totality and peacefulness and tranquility, and drawing them and painting them was probably, I think, especially with the deck of cards, it took me 9 months. And it was, I was on a constant high. It was just such a blissful place to be. So I would imagine guiding people through doing their own same thing. You do get so encaptured and enraptured by the whole process that there's a sense of beauty there and peacefulness that is just absolutely magical. And
it's so interesting. People really reveal themselves through the process. So if somebody's really hard on themselves, they're going to be hard on themselves as they create the mandala. So it's interesting just watching people as they go through their creative process, and it tells me, it's so revealing about how they are in relationship with themselves. And it's an interesting process. I did a class recently, and I had one girl that was just blissed out and having a great time, and another one that was just utterly tortured through the entire thing and left her painting there, hasn't come back to finish it, and all she has to do is put some bling on it. And she's a beautiful girl, but she's really struggling in her life despite any false masks she's portraying, because it's just so tough on herself. And so it's a glimpse into how we are in life, and it really can teach us to lighten up on ourselves and enjoy the journey a little bit more. I learned so much by creating mandalas, and
they are phenomenal.
They are, and a lot of times what happens, this is something that happens pretty consistently in my classes, when people finish them, and maybe they've been hard on themselves through the process, maybe they didn't enjoy the process, maybe they're saying they hate it, but then when I pick it up and put a frame on it and stand back and they see it, oftentimes they're brought to tears. And often they will say, "I can't believe I did that, because it's so beautiful. I can't believe I did that." And I said, "You didn't. The universe did it through you. It was a collaboration." And it's a way I really learned to collaborative process, that connection to the divine. It's like when I get stuck and I don't know what I'm going to do next, I don't know what color to choose, or I'm frustrated with the way things are looking, stop, take a moment, close your eyes, take a deep breath, settle into your heart. Relax, breathe, and ask for the wisdom within or the universe to reveal your next steps, or what is it I need to hear right now? How can I receive the support that's here for me right now? And instead of pushing through and choking things down and fighting what is, I've learned to be more gentle with myself through the process, which I've been able to apply to my life. And it's a much more beautiful way to co-create. It's a much more beautiful way to live. I used to go through these torturous experiences birthing these mandalas, and my husband's like, "Oh, you're just in phase 2." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because you always start with such enthusiasm and excitement, and then you get stuck and you hate it and you hate yourself and you want to stab it, and you get really depressed. But then when you push through, you finally get to the place of appreciating it again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have phase 2 days in my life. I had a phase 2 year. So the mandala taught me when I'm in hell, just what is it I can appreciate? What is it I can enjoy even though I'm not liking what I'm creating? Well, I like the feeling of the paintbrush and I like the feeling of the paint on the canvas. And I do that in my life now. I'm not having a good time, but what can I focus on that I appreciate? What am I grateful for? And how can I bring myself back to the present moment so that I can navigate through this bumpy terrain with a little bit more sweetness and gentleness and kindness? And I rarely have phase 2s in my mandala painting now or in my life, because I know even if something's not pretty or doesn't, things aren't looking the way I want them to, it's temporary. My teachers would say it's how we are through the process that's the most important part of the process. It's not out there, it's the in here. And can you be kind and gentle and loving with yourself at all times? The more I do that, the better life works.
Oh, absolutely. I know that there are moments when we're meant to instead of other things, and it's kind of like I have come to a time in my life where if things aren't really moving and I feel like geez, I'm spinning my wheels here, something's wrong. It's kind of like, okay, it's time for me to practice patience and get myself back to center. And somebody said to me once, well, you've been sort of in limbo now for a while. What are you doing? And I said, I'm waiting for the universe to let me know which way to go. And, they looked at me like, are you serious? And I said, well, look, I'm not going to get a telegram, but I said, I will get a call. And they looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. And I said, I will get a call. I have a calling. It's not a wrong number. I'm pretty sure of that.
That's great.
Well, there are times when, especially in this field, I think you want to double check, triple check, and quadruple check, just to make sure your ego, your ego isn't going off half cocked. People told me for the longest time, I was teaching and I had 2 masters and I'd been teaching for a long time, so I was up there. And when it started to look as though the spiritual realm was definitely an area that I was supposed to be in, people would say you should be in this field full time, and I said no. I'm a single parent and I have great credentials and stuff like that, and the paycheck is good, and I have a son to put through college, but when I retire, I'll do this full time. And I kept saying, I can't let go of this because I need the financial security, but when I retire, I will do it full time. I said, and this is a good lesson for people to be careful what you say. I had a car accident. And I had vertigo and a couple of other things. So I was out of work for a year and a half. And my mother said to me, well, you have the readings. You could do the readings. And I said, no, if the universe wants me to do the readings full time, the universe is going to provide. And so the bills mounted and, son in college. And my mother said, I can give you a roof and I can give you food, but I can't pay your bills. And I said, neither can I. And so they mounted, and somebody said to me, well, don't you have disability insurance? And I said, I only paid, 1 payment. I'm pretty sure it doesn't count. And turned out it did. And I filed the paperwork, and they made it retroactive to the day of the accident. And I got a check for about $5,000, and that helped tremendously. And then regular payments coming in, and my mother said, okay, now are you going back to work? And I said, no, this check doesn't come close to what my paycheck was. Give me a break. And so a couple months later, the bills were again way up there, and somebody said, you really ought to apply for SSI. And I said, no, I have a job. I just can't do it right now. And they said, no, that's what SSI is for. And so I went down and applied, and the woman said, well, you're usually turned down 2 or 3 times, and it may take a year or so. And I said, I'm just making everybody happy here. I understand all that. And I filled all the paperwork out. 3 weeks later, I was approved. And I got a check that was retroactive. It was another $5,000 check. And between the 2 checks, my mother said, okay, so you're going to actually do readings now. And I said, no, this doesn't come close. Couple more months, more bills. And I was forced into early retirement. I was in my 40s. And, that's too young to get anything, but they started my pension. And retroactive to the car accident, another $5,000 check. And when I looked at the 3 checks that came in, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mother, and she said, see all this gray hair? And I said, you can't fool me, Mom. You had that to start with. And, she said, but it's going to be white. And I took the 3 checks and I laid them out on the countertop, and the 3 checks added together equaled to the dollar my last paycheck.
Wow.
And I looked at my mother and I said, now I know the universe wants me to do this work full time, and I will plow in. And that's exactly what I did.
Wow. You got that divine support. Mm-hmm.
But it was waiting, and it wasn't so much. It was that I didn't want to do anything that was my ego saying, oh, you're great at this and you're wonderful at this. And I wanted to really know that I was going to make a difference, and that was decades and decades ago. And
I love that.
The universe continues to surprise me every day, and it's. I'm working on the whole process always, but when I come to one of those brick walls or I get one of those 2x4s in the face, like, are you paying attention? It's like, well, I may have not been, but I am now. I guarantee you. I think that's what everybody gets in their life, and because I was blessed with a car accident. I was blessed with vertigo. I was, I've been blessed all over the place. I've been very, very fortunate. But it's always been a struggle. It's always been, is this ego or is this spirit? And I think that's something all of us struggle with. And when people say to me, I've done all the work I need to do, I'm perfect. And it's like,
oh, you're an ascended master. That's awesome.
Yeah. I know, it's kind of like, I hate to break this to you, but if you were perfect, you would not be here.
That was very true. There's always going to be something else to learn. It's good not to put a lid on that, to keep our hands open, to keep that cup empty so that we can continue to receive and learn and grow. And I love this saying, God throws pebbles, stones, bricks, and then you get a brick wall. And I've received a few of those myself. I think most people can relate. But I think what you're saying is so important and so helpful in my life, to be discerning, to not rely on one's own understanding. Don't think, oh, this is a good idea, I'll do this. That's generally the ego. You want to get in touch with that still small voice within and be prompted from that place. And then I do look for the God winks in my life and the breadcrumbs. And, I did the same thing, Barbara, years ago. I thought, I'm going to do some great work. I'm going to go down to LA and I'm going to work with the prisoners and I'm going to do grief counseling. I'm going to be on the front lines and I'm doing great work. And I ended up getting in a car accident, and I had some time to think about, what was that? I was doing good work. I was being of service. I'm doing God's work. And then I realized I was relying on my own understanding. It seemed like a good idea. And I spread myself too thin. And I was yanked back on that leash that was kind of pulling me out of my center, got on my knees, and I made a commitment that I would never, ever get out of my bed in the morning until I really committed myself to spirit. I do a 6-step morning process that I have done every day ever since, and it really does keep me in the eye of the storm. It keeps me on my knees. It keeps me humble. It keeps me aligned. And it seemed, my ego thought those things were a good idea, but my soul had other plans. And I really don't should on myself anymore. I don't navigate from the mind anymore. I really want to listen to my heart and soul and spirit. And like you, sometimes it's like, well, not much is happening right now. And what I got that I loved, it wasn't just, I used
Mm-hmm.
to think it would be patient and faithful, but what I heard with this last round was like, well, if nothing's going on, maybe you're just supposed to be relaxing. I was like, wow,
Yes.
I love that. If nothing's going on, maybe go ride your horse or paint a picture or do something fun and creative. So I kind of like those lulls in my reality now because it's time for me to rest. I can take a nap. I can be creative. My inner child gets to have a play date with a friend or
Mm-hmm.
with God, and I'm so grateful for those seasons of silence or peace. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
been wonderful. It's a blessing when we can reframe that.
it really is, and sometimes and everyone is, we're human. We're down here because we're human. We're a spirit in a human body. Yes,
Hmm.
we're a spirit on a human trip, not a human on a spiritual trip. And
Right.
and I think the thing that you know I wrestle with ego constantly because I really don't want it to be out there. I don't want it steering the ship because for sure we'll hit a reef.
Right. Right.
And I can remember there was a time where um, when the cards came out, the publisher took me to the ABA in Anaheim, and I had somebody ask me if I wanted to, if I ever worked in a bookstore, and my theory is if somebody offers me something or asks me something, unless it's against the law, I say of course. And so once I did that here and there, I thought, this is wonderful. This is what the universe wants me to do. See, here's where the bells should have been ringing off the hook, and they probably were, and I wasn't listening. So I spent a fortune putting together presentation books, making contacts with bookstores all over the country, calling them, asking them if they'd like to see the presentation book and what I could do at the store and the kind of material I would present and do, and all of that stuff. And the presentation books probably cost me $100 a piece to put together, and I put together 50. And I sent them after talking to the store owners and saying they said yes, they would like to see it. I mailed them the presentation books with a self-addressed stamped envelope to mail it back. Do you want to guess at how many bookings I got and how many of the books I got back?
Yeah, I kind of have an idea, but why don't you tell me?
None.
Oh.
Not a one. And it was like, huh. And when I stood back, I realized it was, I think I know where I'm supposed to go. I'll
Right.
steer from here, and
Mhm.
it was almost like sometimes I envision my guides and stuff as in a boardroom, and sometimes when I hear laughter, I know I have stepped in something, or if I take off in a direction like that one, I hear a door slam and I know they've all gone out to play golf and they'll be
Mhm.
back to help me pick up the pieces because I am going to hit something big time. And
Mhm.
so it's there's a constant, sometimes they say, you do when you're out when you're out shopping and you're tight on money, it says, do I want this or do I need this? In my mind, if something comes up, is this ego or is this spirit?
Mhm.
And it's you have to be so brutally honest that it's like, oh, I really want to do it, but I don't really think that's the direction if you're supposed to do
Right.
something and you think it's your ego and you back up, it will come back again to you. You can't get rid of where spirit wants you to go.
That's so true. And it really is about being discerning about what we say yes to. And that's what got me in trouble with the car accident. I was saying yes to things that were showing up because I thought, well, if it's showing up, it must be what God wants me to do. But I didn't take that quiet time. I didn't turn inward and sit with it. And I think our bodies can be very telling. I think probably when I was approached with this and I was told about it, I probably had some like energy in my body. And sometimes that energy, and this is where discernment comes in, is that energy a constricting energy or an expansive energy? And is this, does it feel good? Is it a pit in your stomach or does it feel like a deep breath? And I shoved through. I'm like, I have a good work ethic. I can do this, and I shoved through. But I've done enough work that I don't have to choke things down that I don't want to do. I don't have to do things that don't fit or resonate. Um, I think it's vital to really check in with ourselves and spend some time with things. I used to do this knee-jerk yes to everything like you, Barbara. I don't do that anymore. It's like, let me see, let me sit with it. Let me see how I feel about this as I check in with my heart, my body. And I love, love this quote. If God is your co-pilot, switch seats. So I definitely want God in the driver's seat of my life. I do not want the steering wheel. I do not want to rely on my own understanding. It's gotten me in trouble repeatedly. And so as long as I stay on my knees and in the passenger seat, I can observe the scenery. I can navigate from a place of joy and connection and the synchronicity that shows up, the grace, the ease, the support that shows up. It's definitely a preferred way of being from my perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And what I find is that while my perspective, I have a good one, I think, but it's not as broad or as expansive or have the potential that what Spirit can have in mind. Spirit sees over the horizon and beyond the clouds, and my eyes don't go that far. And there are moments where, like I said, when I'm offered something, if it's not against the law or my moral values, I always say yes, because it puts me in positions that I never would have looked for. Somebody called me, a bunch of people called me a long time ago and said, "Do you ever speak at ladies' luncheons?" And I said, "Sure." And now I have lunch, and I have lunch with ladies, and I speak. So technically, I was not lying. And they booked me. They booked me for this luncheon that these ladies were having at this really exclusive golf club. And they said, and the person who booked me said, "Now look, their attention span isn't all that great, and so you only have to talk for maybe." I was ready to talk for a couple of hours, and do some demonstrations and explain stuff, and so I said, "Okay," and she said, 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops.
Wow.
And I said, "Okay," and she said, "And what are you charging?" Now, I would have flipped something out, but something told me to just wait a minute, and I said, "What did last year's speaker get?" And she said $500. So I said, "That'll be fine." I figured free lunch, 15 minutes from my house, 15, 20 minutes talk top. Yeah, I can do this. But it was, it was kind of like I never would have gone out looking for that. I mean, I have had things come to me, literally come to me, and that I wouldn't have even considered, and yet there they were. So if you stop trying to manipulate where you're going and concentrate on putting value and worth in the moment, you attract to yourself magic. And it does come to you. When I stopped doing readings on this radio show, and just decided that I was going to interview authors who wrote phenomenal books that I would read, because that to me would be, that's just so laughable. It's I love reading. And, I thought, well, okay, I know a couple of authors that I can talk into, letting me read their books and stuff, but I have no idea where we're going to go from there. And I'm booked all the way into May. And these are authors that came to me, that I didn't have to go and you came to me. You were a suggestion from a mutual friend.
Yes.
It's amazing how things work if you get out of the way.
I love what you're saying, and I found it works really well for me too, Barbara. It's like instead of forcing, pushing, pressing, being ambitious, and chasing, I like to relax. I like to live more from that place of grace and gentleness. And I think for some people that more aggressive or ambitious way of being may work for them. And, I think it's a more masculine approach. And what I know about me and suspect about you is that we tend to be more feminine-based. And that's how I personally like to live. This is how I like to manifest. I like to take responsibility for my inner reality, and then my outer reality shifts around that. And I do feel like, and that's one of my fun favorite affirmations, I am a magnet for magic, miracles, and money. I'm a magnet for magic, miracles, and money. And I've shared that with people, and they often come back to me with stories that are pretty remarkable, pretty magical. They're like, "You're not going to believe this, Tammy." And I'm like, "Try me. I probably will."
Oh no, that's on my
God's pretty cool like that.
that is on the front page of my computer.
Is that
and
right?
it's what I see. That's what I see every morning when I start, and every time I open this computer up, I am a magnet for magic, miracles, and money. Yes,
No way.
and it
God wink. I love it.
absolutely. And it's funny, though I have stopped, advertising readings or soliciting them or whatever. Since I've been doing that, I've had people calling me from out of the blue for readings, and I'm not looking for them. I mean, I do them and I love them, but I'm my website is only a teaching site. This radio show is only a teaching site, so that there's none of the I listened to somebody's interview with one of the authors that I was going to be doing a show with, and that person spent the first 20 minutes of her show talking about getting readings and counseling and this and that, and from people, and how to connect with her, and I mean it was this lady's show, and she fully go for it, but it was like, holy mackerel, don't you have a guest? And it was kind of like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person.
Well, it feels a little bit grabby. It feels like a little bit more of a fear-based approach. And I think, money is one of the more interesting tools this planet has in regards to teaching us and creating bad karma and challenging karma for ourselves. If we make money our higher power, if money is more important than integrity and God and love to us, we're probably going to go off track and create some messy things that we're going to have to come clean up. And I think I've been cleaning up a lot of that in this lifetime.
Yeah, I've been decluttering myself as well.
Yeah, decluttering, that's the word for it.
You make a good point, because sometimes we gather stuff around us because it gives us security, and the reality is it's stuff, and we need to really have that the worth is inside, and the connection with spirit is inside, and when that happens, stuff comes to you.
For sure. I say, go for God, and all things will be added unto thee. And the more I live that, the more it continues to expand. It's a pretty remarkable posture. And I've tried a lot of other approaches. I found that this one is the most comfortable, most effective. And the other thing I really believe is, like, two of the primary areas that we have to learn our tools or learn our lessons here on planet Earth. The tools are love and relationship, prosperity and money. And if you dig beneath both of them, it all comes down to the basic same principles. It's like, if we know ourselves as worthy, valuable, precious beings, if we're relaxed in that posture, what is ours by divine right can show up with a lot of grace, ease, support, divine synchronicity. It's an amazing way of navigating. If we have unprocessed shame or things that we feel guilty about, and we're trying to wear a false mask, and then from that posture try to get and manifest and prove, it's rarely effective. And even if it is, the prosperity or the relationship will not be sustainable, and it will not be fulfilling.
No, that's true. And you can't, you can BS probably everybody except the universe.
And you can kind of see through that. You brought that up earlier, and I love it. God has a much higher vision and perspective than we could possibly comprehend from our limited earthly experience. And that's why I have something that I love to work with, my God box. And anytime I think I know what I want, I'll write it down, I'll claim it, I put it in the God box, and I surrender it. And I say, God, you know better than I do if this is something that's good for me, or the highest good for me, or all concerned. And so I'm going to relax, and you please reveal to me the red flags or green lights. I want to go the direction of green lights. And I also have something called the sovereignty prayer that I have on my website. And it's a meditation that I wrote, or prayer that I wrote for myself. And when I shared it with my students, they're like, could you please put that to music and share that with us? And it really is just saying, God, you know me better than I know myself. You know every hair on my head, they're counted. You know my gifts, talents, propensities. You know my heart, my soul. You know my contracts, my spiritual contracts better than I do. And in this moment, I'm just going to relax and trust that you have got this. And I'm just going to keep my eyes open. And I'm looking for the synchronicity and the green lights. I'm looking for the beauty and the joy. And it can take a while to get to the place of really trusting the process and having faith that this work works. But the more we do it, the more I've found life shows up in a really incredible way. And I do feel like most days I'm pretty blissed out and blessed and live in heaven on earth.
No, it is. Magic happens. It really does. But you know, it's. I think that the other thing that I really I want people to understand is if you're involved in spirituality, if you're involved in and to me, spirituality is not the philosophy, but living the philosophy. That's when you're on the spiritual pathway. And so many people, I often say you can be a parrot or a prophet. If you memorize stuff and quote it back to people verbatim without really understanding the depth and perception that goes into it, then you're a parrot. But if you take it into yourself, if you make it your own, if you live it and manifest it, then you're the prophet. And it's sort of like it's so important that you be genuine. And so often people say they are something, but they genuinely don't believe it, and so that means that they're not. And if things don't work and you think you are genuine, you have to go back and you have to, check all the connections to make sure they're all there. And you may have crossed wires someplace, or there has to be a reason things don't work, because if you're genuine and if you're sincere and if you have integrity, then things should flow the way that you're supposed to be. And maybe you're just looking in the wrong direction. Maybe there's another direction you're supposed to go. I know people that I have a good friend who is trying to get pregnant, and she's 47, and she has to do in vitro, and she has to do this, and she has to do that. And I said to her, do you think that maybe Spirit has other things in mind for you? Maybe there's another direction. I mean, I'm not saying don't do this, for God's sakes. Absolutely try everything, because you have to. But there may be something out there that is even more of an experience than what you feel motherhood would be.
Right.
And
I think that's true. And how did she respond?
She wasn't thrilled.
Yeah, because she has an attachment, and I would say put it in the God box and let God decide.
Yeah,
enjoy your connection. Yeah, because sometimes those stumbling blocks, what we perceive as a brick wall or a stumbling block, is really there just to redirect us. We think we know what we want. I thought I knew what I wanted, and I got what I thought I wanted, and it wasn't tasty. It wasn't delicious. It was not wonderful, I have to say. I mean, moments were wonderful, but the overall experience wasn't that wonderful. And I surrendered and was redirected. And, everything I thought that I wanted, being in Los Angeles, being on the red carpets, being involved with all these, high-profile humans, I thought the experiences would be like, this is so fun. This is such a celebration. This is an amazing, wonderful experience. This is a heaven on earth experience. But as I stepped into that arena, that wasn't how I felt. That wasn't my perception of the experience. As I surrendered and said, God, you decide, I do feel like that. I live in this amazing community with some amazing human beings. And when we get together, which is frequently for holidays or birthdays or Halloween or Christmas, we're all dressed up. We go to our little red carpet events in Boise, Idaho, and it is so celebratory, and we all lift each other up. There is no competition. It's just incredible joy. And I have the connection with the horses. I paint, I create, I celebrate, I lift other people up, and I am living my version of heaven on earth. But, I don't think we can consciously know. It really does take that partnership and collaboration with that something greater to find our true place on the planet.
And a lot of people I know use, they do stream of consciousness writing, and they say they channel, and often, when I read what they've written, sometimes it's beautiful, but I think the one thing that I try to put across to people is that the true channeled material will never tell you personally what to do. It will give you philosophy. If you get something like "Thou child of light, thou star of the universe," you should be going this direction, taking this course, or doing this, or stop, or not being involved with so and so. That's your ego, pretending to be your higher consciousness.
Interesting.
And it's kind of like the spirit within will give you a philosophy through which you can make an informed choice or decision. We have free will, but it will never tell you, yes or no, because that's not its purpose. It's here to learn through your experiences. And the one thing that I tell everybody, and it's funny because if you play with it, you'll find it's absolutely true. Your higher consciousness will never let you picture yourself doing something that's inappropriate for your pathway. Now, you may be able to picture yourself robbing a bank, but if you look at your face as you're robbing the bank, you'll see you're not happy. Unless, of course, you're a bank robber, and then, of course, the whole thing falls apart. But it works for haircuts. It works for just about anything. At one point in time in my life, I thought I would like to be an astronaut, even though I get claustrophobic, but I figured I could handle that. And I could picture myself in the spacesuit. I could picture myself in the capsule. I could picture myself going through liftoff. And I was okay. I was confined. I felt protected. I was fine. And then I threw up. And if you throw up in one of those spacesuits, you're living in it. And I decided that was my
That's
message.
not how you want to live.
Yeah, and so I took that off of my bucket list. but if you're trying to make a choice or decision in life, if you can picture yourself joyfully doing whatever it is you think, that's most probably a good direction for you to go.
Joy. I am in complete agreement. I'd hired a publicist at one point thinking, I'd really like to get my books out there and help as many people as I can, like themselves, love themselves, line up with their soul self. And it wasn't really all that effective. And then I finally said, God, I did my sovereignty prayer. You know better than I do what my highest good is. And so for now, I'm going to relax and enjoy the journey. And I started taking more horseback riding lessons. I started getting really creative projects that were completely not on my conscious radar. And I really do believe, for me, creativity is my lifeline to the creator. So I started making candles. I started making journals. I'm doing more mandalas. I'm riding horses. And I am pretty blissed out. And I'm like, don't know if I'm making a big impact on the world right now. But more and more clients are showing up, and like Tamu had put me in touch with you, things are happening, but I'm not efforting. I feel like I'm just being, and then things show up, opportunities show up, and I don't feel like I'm doing a lot of heavy lifting. And if you're familiar with David Hawkins' work, really the more peaceful and joyful we are, the brighter our light is, and the more that can counterbalance the negativity in the world, which is far more effective than beating your head against the wall and doing good work from a really uncomfortable position. So I'm just experimenting with this and just having a lot of fun right now, and we'll see what happens next.
Well, I think you did. I know you did the right thing. I mean, your books are great, and you put the right energy into them, and it's sort of like, you have to let go of them and let them fly, and they will seek where they're most important, and that's they will take care of the journey themselves. I never with the deck of cards, I never did anything to promote them, actually. I mean, I went with the publisher to a couple of conventions, and I kept telling him when we went, I said, look, these cards are a sleeper. This was in the 90s, early 90s. And I said, the deck is a sleeper. It's not the universe or whatever isn't ready for them. And we fast forward to, I don't know, about 10 years ago, and he stopped publishing them, and I got the copyrights back on them, and the deck started to sell. And I mean, it's just amazing. People who want the deck have to search for it.
I have it.
I know. I was impressed. I was very impressed because
I love the mandala. Well, you were ahead of your time. The mandala is kind of starting to go mainstream now. So yeah, you had a beat on this before the rest of us. So it's a wonderful deck of cards. I love it.
It was fun to do, and that's the bottom line. It was kind of like I thought Standard Tarot were for me kind of negative. There was only the Aquarian and the Rider-Waite deck out when I did it. And and it just, to me, a death card and all this other stuff, and come on, the gypsies took a deck of cards and created a fortune telling tool out of it, and it just didn't resonate to me. And I thought, well, let me just recreate the whole thing, being absolutely clueless as to Standard Tarot or anything like that. I just did what came. And and it works. At least it works for me, and I understand it works for other people too. And it's more of a tool for self-development rather than, you can read with it. Of course you can read with it, but it's more of an independent thing. As it's like, what do I need to look at today? What aspect in life should I pay attention to? What cosmic law or universal energy is most at play within my life at this particular point in time? It's a deck that teaches spirituality if you work with it that way. So
I love it.
So
I just have to tell you, Barbara, twice when we've been speaking on this call, I picked up your deck of cards, and both times I picked the same card.
Oh, what'd you pick?
Universal Balance.
Isn't
that a good one?
It's a very good one, and
pretty too. I love the colors and the shape and balance. I think it's so key, to stay balanced and to stay centered and aligned. And when we do that, life can flow. So I think that's such an important point. And I do love this deck. Where can people get it? Is it Amazon? That's where I got it.
Yeah, you can go on Amazon. You can go on eBay. You can go on ABE Books. They carry it. It's out there. You have to search for it, but it is still out there.
It wasn't that hard to find. I got it on Amazon pretty quickly, pretty easily.
It used
fun.
To, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, you could pick it up at $6 a deck. Not so the case now, but they're still out there, and the publisher did offer to publish them for me. But I had to order 3,000 decks, $6 a deck, and I didn't happen to have $18,000, nor did I want to store that many decks of cards anywhere.
Yeah, that's a big commitment.
So my feeling is, you know what? The harder it is for someone to find, the more they have to want it. So
that is a good point.
and anybody, the pictures are out there. You can print them out and make your own deck as far as that goes. So, somebody wants it that much, they'll do it. Now, I recommend people read the Manifesting Love book first, because
I would agree.
To my mind, understanding yourself and coming into a good relationship with yourself and getting yourself balanced and understanding that what you think about yourself is what you're radiating and projecting, and that's what you're going to attract.
Yes.
So it makes great sense to get a handle on all of that material before you go into manifesting prosperity. Now, a lot of the exercises are the same,
similar,
but I think prosperity is something that almost naturally comes when you have this relationship with yourself.
I would absolutely agree. Marianne Williamson had said years ago that it's like most people get one or the other first, and she got the career and prosperity before she got the relationship stuff. I got the relationship stuff first, but then the prosperity came after. What people tell me is that manifesting love will definitely take you deeper into an emotionally healing process. People tend to cry a bit more, And I think it's vital because so many of us have unprocessed grief. So many of us have that inner child in those places inside that have been hurt. And nobody can heal those hurts for us except for ourselves. And, my intention in writing that book, which wasn't an intention at all, just kept showing up when I would meditate and God would say, right. I was doing a television show and things kind of stalled out. And what I got when I meditated was right. And I was like, right what? Right about what you know. Well, I don't know anything. Well, you know how you went from a dysfunctional relationships to one that works. Well, I do know that. Not everybody knows that. Write it down. But my intention was to share my process, but also the process of other people that have had great success. And then with every chapter, there's exercises so people can make this journey and rewire themselves. And I get feedback from people all over the world. It's remarkable. It's like, oh, I picked up your book at a garage sale in Tennessee. Oh, I found your book in a box of books in Brazil. It's really astonishing. And it's like you said, you do the creative work and you let it go. And it's been a blessing. It's been amazing to connect with people that have read it and to hear how it supported them in coming into a more compassionate relationship with themselves. That is so vital. To be kinder and more gentle with themselves. I think we attract people that treat us like we treat ourselves. So if you want life and others and your beloved to treat you with, say, respect and kindness, treat yourself with respect and kindness and start to watch how things shift around you. Years ago when I was still in utter hell and I'm like, God, where's my husband? Send me a man who will love me, respect me, and cherish me. And he goes, I will, but not until you love and respect and cherish yourself. And I was like, no, say there's another way. That sounds terrible. I'll do anything but that. And then I heard this really interesting comment. Well, then you'll be playing games the rest of your life. So it's so interesting to me when I connect with people and they play games. I know that at some deep level they don't love themselves because, I love the quote, the greatest gift you can offer the world is to be authentically yourself. So let's think about authenticity. What is that? It's being raw. It's being real. It's being our authentic self is loving, but our authentic self is also able to say, I don't know. A lot of people don't want to say, I don't know, or I'm sorry. A lot of people don't want to say that because that false mask, that ego, doesn't want to ever be perceived as quote unquote weak. But there's a big difference between weakness and vulnerability. The authentic self is vulnerable. It is kind. It is loving. And so to get back to that place of authenticity within ourselves, that's how we attract what we want, that water finds its own level. We take responsibility for ourselves, and then life will take care of the rest.
Speak a little bit about how we sabotage ourselves, because that's an interesting chapter or two.
That's a good subject to talk about. And we all have, according to Carolyn Mace, who's this expert about archetypes and subpersonality, she says we all have an inner saboteur. And I couldn't figure out, well, why is that? And what is that? What is the purpose of this? And the saboteur is a part of ourselves that maybe feels unworthy, or the part of us that maybe isn't on board with what it is we say we want. Like maybe you consciously think, I would love to have a great relationship, but maybe there's some buried subconscious thought that is something like, I'm afraid if I'm in a relationship, I'll lose my freedom. Or I'm afraid that they'll see the real me and I'll be embarrassed. Like if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me. So we really have to pull those fears out of the closet and look at them and sit with them and heal them. Because if we don't deeply, deeply, authentically believe in our value and our worthiness, it's going to be really challenging and perhaps impossible to attract someone who sees our worthiness and value. And if they really do and we don't, we're not going to be in that relationship indefinitely. We're going to find a way to screw it up. Because on some deep level, we don't believe it. We don't believe we deserve that love. We don't think we are valuable and worthy, so we couldn't tolerate that kind of love coming from another. So in order to stop sabotaging for ourselves, I think it's really important to look at what you think about yourself is shameful. What are you ashamed of? Let's bring it out. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. And if you're not comfortable speaking to someone, you can do this in the silence of your home with a candle and a journal. Really think about what is it that you're ashamed of. And there's a difference, Barbara, between guilt and shame. Guilt is maybe things we've done. Shame is the essence of who we are. And we are not born from original sin. I don't believe that. I used to, and when I did, life didn't work very well. I believe in original blessing. And until we can relax and receive that and believe that for ourselves, our life isn't going to show up in a really beautiful, grace-filled way. We can't have magic, not sustained magic, and we can't manifest consistent miracles unless we believe we are loved and important and valuable and worthy from the perspective of our Creator.
I agree with you. And I know so many people that really do sabotage themselves. It's like, oh, this is too good to be true. Okay. Well,
it's hard to receive it if you don't believe you deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, to me, it's like, oh my gosh, you work so hard to get here, and now you're saying, I don't know, this is too good to be true, and then you hear those self-doubts coming in, and then it's like, yes. Well, let's work on yourself. Let's make you worthy of all of this, so you really know you deserve it. And sometimes you get there, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's next go round. Before you go round again, let's examine all this. Let's see where we can make things better. Not that you're broken, but let's see if we can make things better. And sometimes people will resonate to the let's make things better instead of let's fix what's broken, because when you're making things better, you actually are fixing what's broken. But it's easier for them to embrace the I'm going to get better and this is how I'm going to do it, rather than I'm broken and I need to be fixed.
Big difference in those postures and that vibration.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the most important thing we can do to heal, and this is what my teachers would tell me when I was in school, it's about bringing love and compassion to the places inside that hurt. And again, the inner child is longing for that attention and affection. And if we can learn to be compassionate and gentle with ourselves when we do make a mistake, and not overly identify with it as who we are, because we're not. We're a spiritual being, as you said, Barbara. We're a spiritual being having a human experience. And simply by virtue of this perception of disconnection from our Creator, we're going to stumble, we're going to trip, we're going to fall. This is a school. That's how we learn. We tend to learn more from our quote-unquote mistakes and challenges than we do through the things that we sail through. Although I do think when we get to a certain altitude, we can do a lot more sailing. We can do a lot more flowing with life instead of being buffeted around on the periphery of the river. We don't have to get slammed into the rocks quite so often. The more gentle and compassionate and kind we are with ourselves, the more unconditionally loving we are with ourselves, the more we attract wonderful, kind people, the more we attract, just like you, the phone will ring with opportunities without a lot of pushing, forcing, pressing, chasing, and coming from that place of fear and unworthiness and trying to prove and do and get. For me, definitely this posture of relaxing, knowing my value, being gentle with myself, it seems to be just a really grace-filled way of creating. And I feel like the universe wants to bestow gifts on us. Like it's Christmas every day. But if you don't believe you deserve it, how are you going to be able to attract it or even recognize it when it shows up? If we're with our heads down and we're going and we're working hard, are we going to see the two butterflies that are dancing outside of our window? Are we going to see the beautiful blue jay that's right there? As soon as I started slowing down and paying more attention to the energy of life and started taking things personally as far as the affection and love and adoration that the universe has for me, like the trees are blowing in the breeze and they're waving at me, and I take it personally, like spirit saying hi. I just started relaxing and seeing the love that's all around me. And once we see it and believe it and know that that's the essence and energy that animates ourselves, beats our heart, breathes us, and everyone else, it sure does seem to change what we see and perceive and how we feel in this world.
Oh, yeah. And, every day is full, overflowing with subtleties from spirit. And if you stop yourself and you say, there's a lesson here, what is it? And, and for me, lessons are always positive.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
it's not, oh, this is negative and you don't want to do this again. It's there's a positive lesson there, and
Yes. Yes,
sometimes
I
it's
agree.
an
Mhm.
absolute struggle. I have a neighbor who doesn't like me because the people who owned the house before me had problems with her. So she's a sad lady, and she's negative, and she has a bad mouth, and it's and in my younger years, really younger years, I had a very sharp tongue, and I could level somebody, without blinking. And she a number of times got me going, and it was I've been here 14 years, so it was a long time ago. But I was trying to work on a sermon for the Sunday, and I was walking down the street, and she started in on me, and I just looked at her, and I realized, and I said to myself, as this woman was verbally attacking me, what's the lesson here? There's got to be a lesson here,
Mhm.
because I,
Mhm.
I didn't do anything but walk down the street.
Right.
And I saw a mirror, and she became a mirror, and I realized if I sank to her level, I became her.
Mhm.
And it was like, whoa. And
Mm.
I said something nice to her, and I walked on, and as I walked on, she was floored. She didn't know what to say. I told her she was looking much better. Her garden was beautiful, and it was a great day. And I realized part of me said, okay, that's the law of reflection, and I should pay attention to it. And at the same time, this is what the higher road feels like, and it's a damn good feeling.
It
And
does feel a lot better to be in our loving.
yeah, and so, no matter what the occasion, whether it's you're finding a parking place or you're not finding a parking place, there's a lesson. There's a good lesson there. It may be that you need the exercise, or it may be that someone else needed the space more, or
Mhm.
it could be any number of things. But if you go through the day, and every time something happens, say to yourself, what's the lesson here? What's the positive
Mhm.
lesson that I get from this situation?
Yeah,
Um,
because if we don't do that, we feel like we're a victim, like the world's against us, the universe is against us, and that feels it's a terrible feeling. It really creates a lot of pain and suffering in our reality. And you're so right. When we can rephrase that question, instead of why is this happening to me, to why is this happening for me. And
yeah.
something that helped me a great deal was understanding the goal line versus the soul line in the world. Because when we incarnate, we didn't come here to necessarily gather and accumulate and just have fun, although that can be a part of the journey. We're here to grow as souls. This is a school. But what I found, if the soul gets what it wants, it doesn't mind so much if I get what I want on the goal line. So if you
Mhm.
imagine a diagonal going up, the goal line is the diagonal going up. Well, I want the car, I want the home, I want the relationships, I want, the money. And if the soul line is going straight across horizontally, if we're going up the goal line, we're getting what we want, and then all of a sudden we're slammed down on the soul line. Something terrible has happened. We've been in a car accident. Our boyfriend broke up with us. I lost my job. And this is where we can say, what is my soul trying to learn? And as soon as we
Mhm.
get that, what I find is we move out of the discomfort of that more quickly and get back up to the goal line where things are more fun and graceful and joyful. And so
Oh,
when we
yeah.
transition, when we die, we don't take the goal line stuff with us. We take the soul line stuff with us. So to keep that in perspective, so people call me sometimes, Tammy, I need an appointment. I'm on the soul line. I'm in hell. So at least they know now. It's like when you're in discomfort, there's opportunities. Sometimes it can be hard to figure that out all by ourselves. That's why I do what I do. I create the meditations for people to do this work themselves, but I'm available to work with them personally if they need some support and a touchstone to remind them of a higher truth. And just understanding this for myself has been very, very helpful. So I don't go into that sense of unworthiness and disconnection. It can support us in staying empowered. What is the lesson? What is the blessing in this? And to really listen to that still small voice within, because there always, you're right, Barbara, there is always something there for us.
Oh, yeah. And what I have found, and I've been in this field for probably, well, more than 50 years now, that that as a teacher, I am a student, because I'm a student, and I'm a student of the cosmos and a teacher at the same time, and I have found that those experiences that I am most effective with people are those that I've had myself. And if I can if I can draw the compassion from my own experience, it is of greater validity to those people that I'm talking to.
For sure.
And when my husband was actually dying in the hospital, he said, "Well, now you can talk to people about having a dying husband." And I said, "Yeah, but I would have rather had this lesson maybe 20 years from now."
Right. Yeah.
Thanks so much for the lesson, but you could have waited for a while. And it was like 2 or 3 days after he passed away, I was on the phone counseling people who had lost their husbands, and I could tell the difference. I used to say, I can't imagine what it feels like, and now I can say, I understand what you're feeling, and it does get better.
I can really relate. What creates that relatedness, that relationship, and I think we can heal profoundly in relationship when we're held in that energy of true understanding and love and compassion. And I remember years ago, Marianne Williamson had said, nobody can help a struggling alcoholic like somebody who's is in recovery, that is recovered from that kind of addiction. Nobody can support an anorexic in navigating that challenging terrain by somebody who has healed that for themselves. And I years ago wondered why I had to go through so much quote-unquote crap. And what I got was, someday you're going to be able to help other people get through this quote-unquote crap. I'm going to be able to be a guiding light for the people that are hurting like I was hurting. And that made things make a lot more sense, because I knew I didn't want to study or learn from counselors or teachers that were just teaching from theory rather than from actual practice. I wanted people to be the living example of what I wanted to learn from and hopefully emulate one day. So I think that is absolutely true. I think we're like spiritual rock climbers, and as we climb the mountain, there are people above us that can help us up, and there are people below us that we can help up, and we can just navigate this terrain to get to the top of the mountain. And I think it's a really, again, a wonderful way to live our lives on this insane planet.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it's a good lesson for anybody to take. If you want to learn something, go to someone who has mastered it.
A living example.
And yeah, I mean, it's funny when I look at my life and I think, I told somebody once, they were telling me their tough times, and I said, time out here, where I'm not charging you for this reading. Let's compare and see who has more crap in their life or has had more crap, and I won. And I said, look, it's all. It's to teach you something. It's to learn from. It's to grow from. It's to become a better person. And don't write thank you notes. Absolutely not. But recognize that you were given a gift with this experience, no matter how bad it is. And a phrase I have coined, and somebody else probably said it, but I can't give anyone else credit for it, so I'm just going to say it's mine. It's that in the middle of every major horrible disaster is the seed of a miracle yet to be discovered.
Yep, and it's so very true. I can look back on the things that I thought were so horrible, and they were the greatest learning experiences, which again is that gem from the soul level perspective, from the divine perspective. If we can, and I think forgiveness can be a really big piece of the puzzle to unravel all those hurt feelings, to get that place of forgiving others and ourselves, and then we can garner that wisdom. And sometimes with forgiveness, we have to fake it until we make it, and it happens in layers, and it is a process. But if that is our intention, and years ago that was what I got clear. What do you want? What do you want the most, Tammi? What I wanted the most was to live a life of love and truth. That's what I boil it down to, and that has been my touchstone and guiding light. And it's been a circuitous journey, and I couldn't have predicted any of it, and it's been a wild ride. But I know for sure, I did not come here to be bored, and I don't think you did either. It's like I'm not going to the carnival to ride the merry-go-round. I want to ride the roller coaster.
Well, I think too, it's as a spirit coming into this lifetime, there were the spirit had a bucket list. And some people's bucket list, spiritually speaking, is bigger than others.
For sure.
But every now and then I think the next time I decide to come back down, I'm going to try to, in some way, leave a message to myself to not be so ambitious, to
relax and enjoy the journey more.
Yeah, to let's pick on a couple of major things and work on them, and not decide to check all the boxes this time, because
I think I went for a big bite myself. I had indigestion for a while.
Yeah, and it's kind of people forget that the lessons may come kaboom, 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 but you asked for that. You signed up for that.
We signed up for it. We can't remember the contract or curriculum, but we can rest easy that is indeed the case.
And there are no mistakes.
It's not a level playing field as we look around on planet Earth. It can seem like, well, it's not fair. Why are some people born with silver spoons in their mouth and they're not even good people? And then there's people running from bullets and suffering at the hands of terrible abuse. Why is this fair? Well, it's not if you just look at it from strictly our human physical world reality perspective, but there's much more going on than meets the eye. We don't know what those souls were up to before they incarnated. And some of us have a bigger bag of karma to clear out of our backpack than others. And we just have to trust that there's a higher order, even if we can't see it.
While physically speaking, we can see and perceive just this reality, as a spirit, there are millions of realities there. There is such an intricate, an infinite web of growth and expansion and development, and the really hard stuff knocks off the rough edges. The subtle stuff, smooths and shines. And from every experience, if you survive, there is a part of you that is brighter. And if you find that part and you some people say surrender to something, and I don't like the word surrender because that means to give up. I like embrace, because that means, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to make it my own and I'm going to grow from it.
That's interesting, because I love the word surrender. To me, what it means is surrender to love, surrender to faith, surrender to the universe. The universe is on my side and has my back, and I can relax and enjoy the journey. So when I start clutching, I tend to want to surrender that same energy that's moving the planets around the sun. So perhaps it's just a different way of perceiving the word, but I take solace in it. At first it was scary because I didn't trust. I didn't trust that life loved me. But the more I practice with it, the more I kind of love that word.
Well, I can see it both ways. I can
yeah,
definitely
and
see
it's just
ways.
like everything. We have to see what feels right and fits for us. There's no one right way. It's like what you'd said. If there's 7.5 billion people on the planet, which is, I guess, what they're estimating, there's 7.5 billion different ways of perceiving this reality. And it's not so much about getting people to agree with us. It's just exploring what it is that resonates for you and your own truth. And just let your life be the living example of what your beliefs are and what your joy is.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. You come to know yourself, you come to treasure yourself, you come to understand your frailties and work on you be a better person, and that means your little spot in the universe shines brighter. And I often think people that like you who have gone through so much stuff, and you have polished yourself and you're shining so brightly, you are a living example of what embracing the light is all about. And it isn't so much that that they need to study and come for counseling and stuff. You're the example. If they read your books, they know what you've been through. And and I'm not saying you don't do a personal service, because of course you do. And by the way, her website is www.tammibphd.com. It's sort of like just the fact that you exist gives people hope that they can find the same kind of light within themselves, and you draw people to you. It's like a magnet. You're radiating the brightness that you found within and sharing it. And
that's my intention,
Yeah,
and the book years ago when I was like, God, I want to be a healer, I want to be a helper, I want to alleviate suffering. He said, don't worry about any of that. Just let your life be the living example of your beliefs. And I was like, really? That's it? Yep. And that's all I do. It's sort of like if you imagine tending your own garden. Instead of me running around telling people how to, get rid of their weeds and grow better tomatoes, I stay in my garden and I till my dirt and I plant my seeds and I weed it and I take really good care of my garden and it's flourishing. And now people are coming up and going, how did you get that tomato to be so big? How would you get those flowers to do so well? And it really is about letting your life be the living example, not so much about trying to rescue anyone, because that never works. It's not so much about telling anybody what they need to do. And something I found to be quite a relief, a friend of mine said to me, Tammy, you need to chill. If people don't ask you the question, they can't hear the answer. You can give them pearls of wisdom, but if they don't crack the door open and aren't ready to receive it, it's just, again, don't throw your pearls before swine. It's not that, we're better than anyone, but, a pig wants corn. The pig does not want a pearl, So I just don't, I don't really engage unless people ask me questions because, it's not good for them and it's not fun for me.
I think that's a great piece of advice because so often people get into this field and like we've been going back and forth here because we're both full of juicy stuff, but basically, the lady you bump into in the grocery store doesn't care and doesn't want to hear it, and waiting to be asked a question. A long time ago when I started teaching in the 60s, I had a friend who had 4 children and she was worried about one of them, and one of them clearly had a disability of some sort. And she was a good friend of mine, and there was no way I was going to pull her aside and say, hey, that little one got a problem there. And it took 1.5 years, and she finally said to me, I'm a little worried about, I forget what his name was now, it's that long ago. And I said, are you asking me as a friend or as a professional? And she said, professional. I said, you need to get him tested. He needs help. And she said, yeah. And it was like, wow. And she said, why did you tell me years ago? I said, would you have listened? And she said, no. And
she might have gotten defensive, or she would have been in a resistance. If they're not open, there's no place for it to go.
I might have lost a friend. And
exactly. You got to let people be where they're at.
Oh, geez, yeah. And that's hard when so often you see something happening and you wanna wave a red flag or blow a whistle or something, and you have to be supportive and wait until somebody asks you for what you've got, because otherwise that's your friend was right. If they're not ready to listen, then saying something to them.
They're not open to receive. And that comes back full circle to what we've been talking about. I think in order to receive great things, we have to be open to receive. So we have to set the intention. We have to know we're worthy. And from my perspective, Barbara, and I would imagine you agree, we're all divine. We're all incredibly worthy, wonderful children of our Creator. But if we don't believe it for ourselves, then it's hard to receive the treasures and abundance of the universe. Another quote that I love, so many of us are like princes and princesses playing around trash cans. Well, I did that for a long time, and I don't do that anymore. There's no more scrapping around a trash can. So many people are running around looking for nickels and dimes on the ground when there's $100 bills on trees above them. And if you can just relax and know your value, it can just show up in your life in a way that's really supportive and co-creative and amazing, miraculous, magical, like you say.
Oh, yeah. And, I think one of the coolest things about this whole process is that, first of all, you're never done learning. You're constantly learning. You're constantly growing. And
absolutely.
And I somebody once said to me, what do your followers think of the journey that you've been on? And I looked at the guy and I said, I would be horrified if anybody was following me because I don't really know where I'm going. And
good. That's because God's in the driver's seat. That's a good place.
You got it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you don't. While both of us have master's degrees in lots of stuff, we haven't mastered life. We're still working on it, and so happily with this radio show, I'm required to read at least one, if not 2 books a week, and I am learning so much. It's such a joy. and it enhances everything I am and everything I do. I don't always agree with everything, but I am absolutely so enriched by the whole process. And I'm going to be 74 this year, and I feel younger than I have ever felt. And having this kind of energy does that to you. It has you constantly excited about life, and it's not slowing down. It's keeping up.
Enthusiasm. Yes, enthusiasm. Yeah. The nectar of the gods. And this is a toast that I love, and I frequently share with friends of mine when I'm having a glass of wine or even a cup of tea. I want to take a moment and just say, you know what? I want to acknowledge this is the best life has ever been, and the best is still yet to come, because I don't ever want to put a lid on it. I don't ever want to stop creating and learning and dancing and enjoying this experience. I want to just continue to expand and go higher and higher and higher until it's finally time to say yes to the next adventure and drop this physical form and see what happens next. And I have a friend that's really interesting who works with hospice, and she goes, I find that people approach death like they approach their life. And if that's the case for me, I'm going to continue to be curious. I want to keep learning, and it's going to be an adventure. And it's been interesting. I've witnessed a few people transition in the last couple of years, and that has been the experience. People that are contracted and fearful and angry, that's how they approach their transition. And the people that are more curious and joyful, they're like, wonder what's coming next. And I really want to stay in that particular posture myself, because as I do and as I trust the process, I enjoy the journey, and I do keep learning. And it's a really fun way to navigate this planet.
Now your radio show is Journey to Center, and it's on Empower Radio. Yes. When is it on?
It's on Thursdays at 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. Pacific, and then it's also on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, and if you go to Empower Radio, or you can Google search Empower Radio Journey to Center, my library of archived podcasts are there, and I've had some incredible conversations with some amazing teachers. I've interviewed Dr. Eben Alexander, Harville Hendricks, Mark Nepo, and a lot of people you won't know of. I've recently booked Byron Katie, Terry Cole Whitaker, just some amazing human beings with some amazing books. And like you, Barbara, when I first started doing it, I was really afraid and was like, who's going to talk to me? And I was out trying to get people to say yes. And now publicists get a hold of me, people find me, and occasionally I'll do an invitation, and 90% of the time people say yes. And it's my happiest place to have conscious conversations. So I just want to thank you for letting me be part of the energy of your show, because I think you're just adorable and so much fun.
Well, Nightlight has been an adventure for me, for sure. And I always, somebody said, why Nightlight? And I said, in the darkness, there always has to be a spark, and I want to be that spark.
Aww.
And it's I'll be a nightlight for people and bring people like you into the show. We're down to our last couple minutes, so I do want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom and your books, and that's manifesting love from the inside out and manifesting prosperity from the inside out. Both of them are just incredible books, and they're on Amazon and they're on Kindle too. So I'm lucky I have them in both ways. I have them in hardback and I have them on my Kindle, and they're incredible. And
if people go to my website, I have a free ebook called The Path to Prosperity. It's a 32-page read. It's 7 blocks of why you're not manifesting what you want, and the 14 things you can do to start moving energy and start getting into the flow of prosperity and attracting love. And there's a guided meditation embedded in this on page 16. And some people listen to that same guided meditation for a year and still get new value. So it's a gift I like to be able to offer people if they're really ready to start moving energy and lining up with their soul and having more fun on this planet.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I'm going to have you back on again, and we're going to have to take stuff apart again and put it back together, because this
but not
has been
until
a
after
joy.
May, because you're busy.
Yeah, that's true. That's it.
You're in demand.
Well, I'm busy with reading books for sure. Thank you again so much. This has been such a joy, and I will certainly be talking to you privately as well. And the show will be on YouTube by tomorrow. So I will catch up with everybody there. And thanks again, Tammi. This has been great.
Thank you, Barbara. God bless you.
You too. Good night
Thank
now.
you. Bye for now.